Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to this podcast. My name is Ali, I'm the host. This podcast is generally in Swedish, but today we're gonna do an episode in English with a very inspiring person that I came across online on X, or formerly called Twitter, and his name is Momodou Taal. He's an anti-imperialist that I very much admire, and he's also a very knowledgeable person with a long history of studying and learning about imperialism, about religion, and about politics and finance in general. So the interview was super nice. We recorded for about an hour. Unfortunately, I had a docking station that stopped working today, so it created some technical issues, and we got about 20 minutes of good material because of the damaged file. We speak about a little bit of his background and the situation in Ukraine, and a little bit of his visits to Cuba and the mood of the people there living under hardcore conditions. And we managed to wrap it up with a bit about what's happening in Africa. So please enjoy this episode, and hopefully we can redo a full episode in the future. Enjoy. You don't leave a job like that feeling refreshed, so to say. Okay. Good to see you, Momodou Taal. How are you, my brother?
Alhamdulillah. How are you? كيف حالكم?
Hey, I'm very good. Thank you, brother. It's really nice talking to you because I've been trying to record an episode with you for a while. I have a Twitter that nobody knows about, kind of. It's very low key, so I can troll people online. And I saw a tweet of yours, and it caught my attention because it's in a time where we see what's happening in Gaza and also in Syria, for that part. A lot of sectarianism is coming into play regarding Muslim sects, etc. So I would like to talk to you about that. But
Yeah.
before we do that, I would like just to hear a little bit about your background, what you've been doing,
Mhm.
and what you do today. I YouTubed you, and I saw that you were organizing a demonstration on campus in some university, and that you got suspended, if I'm not incorrect.
Yeah. I guess more recently, I'm pursuing my PhD at the University of Cornell in the Africana Studies department. We can talk a bit about my work, and I'm sure through the questions today, we'll go into my work a bit further. But we were part of a sustained campaign ever since October the 7th. Different campus organizations kind of came together, and we had very specific demands, right? Calling for divestment from the genocide. We found and discovered that our university is complicit by way of its financial dealings with Israel and military weapons manufacturers as well, or defense contractors as they call them. And we were calling for divestment from these places, right? From these companies as well. In addition to that, we had several protests. I became a target in many ways because I speak a lot at these protests. And then I was suspended twice. I was suspended first in April due to the encampment, and then that kind of got resolved, semi-resolved, not really. But then the big suspension came in September because we attended a careers fair in which two of the companies we have been targeting for divestment, L3 Harris and Boeing, were present. The careers fair was brought to a standstill. I stayed there for about 5-10 minutes and I left early. And then I received an email saying I've been suspended, called into a meeting, and essentially I was told I have to leave the country within 48 hours.
Wow.
And then that became a whole thing. I tweeted about it. I always say, the mistake that they made was giving me 20 to 48 hours because I made a lot of noise on Twitter. And then it became like an international story. And then the
Wow.
Cornell then backed down. And now, even though I'm still banned from campus, I'm allowed to finish my degree
Okay.
and stay in the country for now. We'll see where it goes.
All right. So wait, I don't get that. So you're supposed to leave the country, but at the same time you're allowed to finish your degree, but you're not
No,
allowed.
no, no. So I'm allowed to stay in the country for now. I just say for now because now with Trump in power, we know he's going to go after pro-Palestinian
Yeah.
protesters who were international students.
All right. But are you allowed back into the university?
No, so so I do everything remote now.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
actually, now to be fair, I'm still banned off campus, but just recently they allowed me to work in one building, which took me like 2 months to fight for. I had to fight to get library access. I had to fight to be able to pray Jummah. on
Wow.
campus.
Yeah.
I had to fight to be able to use this one building on campus so I can work from the building.
Yeah.
So it was a whole, yeah, it's insane. I could even show you my conditions right now, which I signed. It's insane. I always have this. Well, I have this line that it's somewhat of an irony that we were protesting apartheid, and now the school has subjected people to
Oh,
apartheid now
wow.
by
Yeah.
bordering and certain bordering. You can only go here at a certain time. You can't be here at a certain time. Where does that? We know where that comes from, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. But okay, so you're considered an international student because you're not a
Yeah.
US native, so to say. What about the US natives? Did any one of them participate, and did they receive any consequences for participating in the Palestine protest?
Yeah, everyone got different levels of consequences. So some were like suspended, some were technically expelled. Some people were even arrested. So we all got different levels of discipline. For me, I was suspended immediately, and then after, like I think a few weeks later, other people got suspended as well, and different levels of punishment.
Okay, wow, yeah, it's tragic. I thought you had free speech over in USA, the land
It's
of the free.
free speech, but what we keep saying in our circles, right? There's a Palestinian exception, the Palestine exception. You can have it's free speech up until it's about Palestine, and this is why I some people might not support the Palestinian cause, but there might be good old liberals, some good old white people who say that we believe in the First Amendment, and
Yeah.
it's a foundational principle of the United States of America. But I keep saying to those people, we appreciate the support, but don't divorce this issue from Palestine.
Mm.
Because it's not, I guarantee if I wanted, for so long, the right wing was saying there's no more free speech in this country. Everyone has gone woke. Everyone is, everyone's soft nowadays. But really and truly, what that means is we want to have the speech to say things that are racist, or we want to have the speech to say things that are offensive to people. Fine, but you saying those things would not be met with the same sort of repression than people who say things about Palestine and protest for Palestine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like they allow themselves to have free speech, but when it comes to topics they don't agree with, then the free speech thing, it's not that important.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Exactly.
I know exactly what you mean. But what brought you to United States to start with? Because you have a background studying in Egypt as well, studying theology, right?
Yeah, or Sharia. So raised in the UK, I finished my undergrad. I got a law degree, and then even the law degree, like I didn't want to be a lawyer. It was more about making my family, pleasing my family and my
Yeah,
parents. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure many of us can relate.
definitely.
And then, but my dream was always to become an Islamic scholar for such a long time. So I went to Azhar.
Yeah.
So Azhar has several programs, but I studied in Azhar Mosque, the kind of Jamia. And then after that, alongside that, I was studying at a place called Markaz Imam Malik, where I specialized in Maliki fiqh,
Interesting.
and Arabic language. So my two main things were fiqh and the Arabic language. Obviously, again, when you're in those places, you do aqidah, so theology.
Yeah.
But my main specialization was fiqh. And even though I don't study it to the intensity that I once did, I love fiqh. And um, I'm definitely still involved in the Muslim debates and stuff. For a long time, unfortunately, Muslim spaces, I'm sure we're going to get into it. You see the kind of vitriol,
Yeah.
you see the kind of living or being in Muslim spaces sometimes can be very toxic,
Yeah.
right? So I decided to kind of, okay, let me leave this. And I think what was frustrating to me when I would see some of the discussions that people were having, and I'm like, the world is on fire right now, right? People are dying. We can talk about US imperialism. We can talk about all the wars in which the US backs, the overthrowing, the coups. And the substance of debate in these places sometimes was like, okay, is it permissible for a woman to travel by herself? I'm just like, okay, I understand you might love fiqh and the intricacies of fiqh. I do too. Like I can read a fiqh book and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But how does that translate to the real world? So
Yeah.
I was like, I can't see myself forever talking about these issues. I just can't because as much as you're going to talk about the fiqh ruling of this, I know that Islamic Sharia is up to interpretation for a lot of the time. Right? People are gonna disagree, interpret. In the Sunni schools, you have four madhabs. In the Shia schools, you have different schools of thought as well. So I kind of pivoted out and I thought, okay, how do I continue my activism and wanting to make a change in the world? And then I started focusing on my PhD. And then I moved to the US in 2022.
Okay, but so now you're not studying religion anymore in America.
So not on a PhD level, but I still, I still read, I still teach
Yeah,
actually. Like I
yeah,
still teach fiqh, I still teach
nice.
Sharia, but private basis, and I think that will never leave me because
I
it
understand.
was something I did, and I still love that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I know the feeling. When you get into it, it's kind of it's nonstop. You know, it's like an ocean.
Yeah,
You can just get more and
yeah,
more of it. But so, what do you study now in the US, in the USA?
yeah. So I study. It's funny. You ask a PhD student what they study, and try to get that into a couple minutes is very difficult. But I think I've
Sorry,
got it
sorry
now.
for
I
putting
think
you
I've
on the
got it.
spot.
So, so I focus on the questions of sovereignty,
Mhm.
right? So how, particularly looking at West Africa, and in West Africa, I take Guinea as my site of analysis. Looking at how do countries reclaim sovereignty after colonization, after formalized independence. So, people have independence days, oh, you get a flag, national anthem, but still, we know that these countries are still not free, right? So, how do countries develop or reclaim sovereignty in this moment, or in these circumstances, in these material conditions, right? And even though I'm very interested in socialism, so I wanted to look at how is socialism practiced. I realized even before I answer the question of socialism, I have to answer the question of sovereignty, right? Because again, and we can talk about this today, and this is how it relates to Iran, right?
Yeah.
How do we understand countries that are clearly anti-imperialist but do not profess a socialist horizon, right? So for some people, and I know there's like many people in the West get uncomfortable when they see like Islamist movements, right? Or like Iran or certain groups on the ground, and they're like, okay, how do we engage with this? Okay, they might not agree, we don't agree with them politically, but they're clearly anti-US imperialism, right? And how do we understand this? And I said, well, and many of us say the primary contradiction, to speak in like Marxist terms, is imperialism. So before we address the question of like building a socialist future or whatever, a more egalitarian future, you must answer the question of sovereignty first, right? And we can see in West Asia today, or the Arab Iranian region, and I say the Arab Iranian region, borrowing from my good friend and comrade Max Ayel, because when we say the Middle East, for Max and others, it normalizes the presence of Israel in that region. Because when you look at Middle East studies in the West today, you study the Israeli-Palestine conflict, right? So now I continue to say now either West Asia or Arab-Iranian region, because I don't want to normalize the presence of Israel in that region. But yeah, so questions of sovereignty is what I study, and I look at Guinea in particular,
All right,
and
interesting.
Pan-Africanism, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Super interesting because I've been thinking about the question of sovereignty and it came up here in the Nordics. I live in Sweden, and we have the question of Greenland and Denmark are
Yeah.
involved in that question. And I was kind of, I saw the whole situation a bit bizarre and I don't know how this is going to end because I thought, so how much can Denmark push back against America, Because I see for many reasons. Well, I can't tell you exactly why, but I have, let's say, a feeling that America is
Mhm.
basically ruling the country I live in, Sweden. When they say, because now we have the American troops in Swedish military bases, the Swedish people didn't have the chance to vote whether they like it or not, and we're just next door to Russia, And the deal with the Americans were that they were also allowed to use. Nuclear weapons in our military bases. And we, as Swedish people, well, I'm an immigrant. They would, the normal Swedes, blonde, blue eyed, they would say, you're not really Swedish. You don't have a say in this. But even for them, they didn't have the chance to vote whether they would like to have American troops in our military bases, even having nukes in those bases. That's a huge
Yeah.
danger now for Sweden. So I thought, like,
Yeah.
so are we a sovereign country? Because just America came and they said, now we want our military there, we want our bombs there, and that's how it's gonna end. That's it.
Yeah.
So
You should ask. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, no. So I thought like the only countries I feel are really sovereign, it's like North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela maybe. Those countries that
Yeah.
we've been taught to hate and feel like they're evil, it's like a dark empire. But in the end, those are the real sovereign countries where the people of the country themselves rule the country. And we see the result
Yeah.
of that. The people starve because they can't trade, then they are expelled from international,
Exactly.
everything. You
Yeah.
know this even better than I, but so what do you
No,
think
no,
of?
no. I was gonna say you can lead us to what we saw today, right?
Yeah.
If you want to ask, is Sweden sovereign? You should ask Zelensky, ask the Ukrainians, because at the end of the day, what we've seen is, and I tweeted something yesterday. The European leaders are so undignified, right? No, but they're so undignified. Like, okay, I reminded of Sekou Toure. Sekou Toure is the first president of Guinea who led Guinea into independence, Guinea Conakry, who I study. And when Charles de Gaulle at the time was going around asking African former colonized African countries, do you still want to be a part of the French like orbit, or do you want to be independent of the French in that way? And he says this line where we will prefer poverty in freedom than luxury in chains, right? And just to kind of paraphrase it, but it's the same thing. Like these countries in Europe, okay, yeah, you have these countries, yeah, some people have good standard of living, and you have the social democracies, as in like healthcare and some places free education. But Trump comes in power and says whatever he wants, and you just have to bend the knee. You have to bend the knee and just be like, okay, go ahead with it. And we follow the Atlantis project. The European countries, particularly Germany, allowed the US to torpedo its economy, to raise in exorbitant levels of gas prices and energy prices in this country, all because of the war with Ukraine. Right. So even the European countries, yeah, they're sovereign, but they are within the US dictates. Right, and in a very undignified manner. Where's the izzah? Like,
Yeah.
where's the izzah? Where's the honor here?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Where's
of
the
course.
honor here? So it's interesting to see, and we see what happened.
And this is where the file crashed. And we kept recording because we didn't see that the file crashed. It was a bit deceiving. Now you can see the end of this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Make sure to follow Momodou Taal on Twitter and Instagram. Link is in description. And please subscribe to the channel if you like. Enjoy. It was about the mood.
Cuba and people believe in revolution, right?
Yes, exactly. That was and the mood when you, because you visited
Yeah.
Cuba twice, you said, and yeah, some people still believe in the revolution. And what do they say? How are they?
Yeah.
How are they surviving this hard
Yeah. I
environment?
mean, again, it's not easy, man. People are struggling. Obviously, it's people are losing weight,
Yeah.
lack of the food shortages. It's a very difficult situation. But I think fundamentally, people, when the mood on the ground, when I was there for both times, I was there for short times, but speaking to people, you get a spectrum. I met more people who are definitely still believe in the revolution. And I think that's expressed by the high levels of democratic participation. So, for example, when they have referendums, you get levels of 60, 70% of people involved. You call for a protest, millions of people turn up, for example. So I think there's definitely, I mean, just not downplay the struggle they're going through, but I definitely feel a lot of the people still believe in the revolution that I experienced anyway, anecdotally. And also, I think it's important people who can make it out there should go and visit Cuba, because what you're seeing in Cuba, in my understanding, was at least um, if you want to see the legacies of socialist revolution, you don't get a lot of the kind of social pathologies. I felt extremely safe there. People were friendly there. Um, and it's so, as someone who's traveled quite a bit, I saw a distinction in the people there. And then that could, for me, was attributed to having a socialist revolution. But yeah, I think if Cuba was to fall, it would be horrific and a shame, not just for the Cuban people, but for the whole entire world, because the Cuba represents what is possible in the world, what is possible when you move away from colonization and US imperialism.
Yeah, but people would say to that when you say what is possible, well, the outcome has been bad because of the sanctions. So the possibility seems maybe it's not a good idea.
Again, it's a question of what you think, how you want to live your life in this world. Do you want to be subordinate and second class citizen in the world, or do you want to at least tempt sovereignty and attempt to be dignified in a way? And again, it's what my teacher always says to me when speaking about Pan Africanism. People say the same thing. Oh, Pan Africanism failed, and look what happened in the 60s and 70s. Now you got these dictators and despots and autocrats and people who don't want to leave power. But my teacher always says to me, and I quote, he says, "It's important to tell young Pan Africanists that Pan Africanism did not collapse under its own weight. Likewise, I will use an analogy to say it's important to tell the world that socialism in Cuba did not collapse under its own weight. It hasn't collapsed, and they have extreme resilience, and that's only possible because of the people they had in that country."
Yeah.
Right. And it's a continual process. And the first conversation you have about Cuba is not about socialism, it's not about Castro, but you have to have to contemporary Cuba, you have to talk about the sanctions. That is the reason why the country is in the way it is, and not
And
because of the government.
yeah, and are the people in Cuba aware of this situation about, you know, standing up against America, and that's why they're under the sanctions and the economic
Yeah, I
situation?
think there's a brilliant documentary people can watch called Cuba and the Cameraman. Brilliant documentary, and also Cuba in Africa. Because one thing that Castro did, and again, the leader does similar stuff today, but Castro was so important. Castro would come out in public and speak to people for 4 hours regularly, talking about the conditions of the country, talking about what they're going through. Why is there a hardship, right? Because now that's important as a leader. If you're a leader, you get legitimacy through the people. A good leader gets legitimacy for the people, and you do that by being in communication and constant conversation, right? You can't be in your, your state house away from the people. You tell no lies and claim no easy victories, as Cabral said. You tell the people what you're going through and why they're going through. People need to believe in a project, right? And Castro was so good at doing that.
All right, nice. That's good to hear that the people are aware. And what do you think about Africa then, to wrap up now, the last question, and the future of Africa? Because I read about a leader, I think he's called Ibrahima Traore, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, and he kind of gained some hype around many
Mhm.
anti-imperialists. And I heard that the French have been expelled out of the Sahel, so-called Sahel region. And what's the situation there?
Again, it's still very early, but we've seen because of so again to talk about the Africa today, you have to talk about the destruction of Libya. And I get this from the work of Professor Zubero Y and also Matteo Capasso that Libya, once Libya was destroyed, a lot of those weapons ended up and fueled terrorism in the Sahel. So in the Sahel, they were dealing with terrorism and also French imperialism as well, French military bases, the extractive processes of natural resources, etc. And what you and when you think of Traore and what's happening in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, these people who took over by military coups are capturing a mood in Africa. You asked me about Africa, there's a new mood, especially in West Africa, also with the election of Jamal Faye in Senegal. And what is this mood? This mood has identified two enemies of progression of young people, of young Africans: French imperialism and the elites of this country. And that mood is very real, right? We cannot discount that mood. Now, I always say I'm cautiously optimistic, right? Because so many things can go wrong and so many things can happen. But there is a mood where people are realizing that the hindrance to their development is French imperialism and the elites in these countries. And people are turning their eyes toward that. And the AES is forming a Pan-Africanist bloc, right? They formed the questions of Pan-Africanism, the ideas of Kwame Nkrumah are back on the table again in West Africa. And I'm just hoping, as a final point, that this spreads to the rest of the continent.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Momodou. It's been great having you on and hearing your thoughts.
Pleasure.
And yeah, and keep doing what you do. Stay on Twitter and tweet your amazing tweets. And it's gonna be
Thank you
exciting
so
to
much.
keep following you. And hopefully one day we'll manage to meet and sit and have this kind of
Inshallah. I
discussion
hope so
in
too.
person. Yeah, you're welcome to Sweden
Yeah.
anytime you have.
I've been before, but
All right.
maybe I'll come again.
Yeah, hopefully, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay, my
All right.
brother.
Thank you, man. Take good
Thank you
care.
very much. You too.
All right.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Bye.
Bye.